Hi, welcome to our channel. My name is Sherry and this is Lauren.
Hello.
Today we're going to be talking about court and when these kids come into care. We just want to make sure that you have, a couple supplies on hand before you get these kids because there's all sorts of things that they might tell you and you want to be able to document them. And so, Lauren, did you want to share what you have to say regarding this
Sure,
topic?
sure. So, when you have a child come into your home, hopefully most of the time there's not going to be disclosures. That is the hope. But sometimes there will be, and you need to be prepared and have a composition notebook handy. That
This
is a
is
comp.
the composition notebook. And the reason why you need this kind is because this is, did you say, Lauren, that this is what's admissible in court that you could use?
My understanding is that is the only type of notebook that is considered that they can use that in a hearing and for when they're going through that process. So the legal
And the
process.
reason and the reason for that is pages cannot be ripped out, and they can tell in this book if pages have been ripped out. That's why the composition notebook is the only notebook that you can use. Do you want to describe what disclosures are, just so
Yeah.
viewers know?
Yes. So a disclosure is when a child shares that they have been abused. Of there's many sorts of abuse, whether it be physical abuse, sexual abuse, whatever it might be. That is a disclosure, and um, I would recommend having, like, if you have three children there, I would recommend having three. Just and it, put your name, put their name on it, put the date on it, and then have. And when you're writing down a disclosure, when a child comes to you, let's say a child comes to you and says, "This happened to me," you want to be very, very careful. Excuse me. You want to be very careful not to question them about what happened, and because when you start questioning them, it can throw a case out the window and get you into a lot of trouble because um, the problem is that it needs to be done in a professional setting with a professional person that knows what they're doing. So when a child comes to you and says, this person did such and such to me, you want to write it down, write the date, and quote exactly what the child said, and say, I put in there, this is the quote, this is such and such and such and such. You can add in there, we were talking, let's say we were at the dinner table, or um, we were, I was helping her get ready for a bath, and she said, blah, 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 but you don't want to give your opinion. You don't want to give your thoughts. You want to give only facts, and you want to make sure that it's very clear what the child was saying versus what you were saying, because that is how it will be presented. Um, at that point, you also want to make a call to DHS, and you need to report that, because that is child abuse. If it is child abuse, it needs to be reported immediately. And what they will do is they will ask you right then and there what exactly was said, by what child, is the child safe, those kind of things. Because it could be that the child is still having visitation with parents, and by the way, it doesn't necessarily stop visitation with parents immediately. It's like that's for the court to decide, and for the caseworker to decide if it's bad enough that the child it needs to stop seeing parents. But they consider that the parents, because it's in a controlled atmosphere and it's monitored, and there's visitation supervisors there, oftentimes they do keep having them visit until the court chooses to stop the visits if they feel it's necessary because of the evidence that they've seen.
Absolutely. And so when you're talking about it can't be your opinion, don't question. Um, you were meaning like don't ask leading questions,
Yes, right.
correct?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, my understanding is, yes, you can say, "Oh, my goodness, you have quite a bruise there. What happened?"
Right.
But if you said, "Oh, you have quite a bruise there. Did your dad do that to you?" Um, that's a whole different thing. You cannot do that. You have to be super careful about that,
Mhm.
because that would be a leading question. And the problem with those kind of things is that the child can easily be led astray and end up reporting something that may or may not be true. And we don't want that. We want only truth, of course. So, um, there may be times when you're calling DHS once a day, because if you have a new child in the home, and if it's, say, a high profile case, um, and if there's a lot being disclosed, um, I would recommend calling them at least once a day, because if you have a bunch of stuff being disclosed, you don't want to forget it, and write down everything you need to write down. If there's a conversation between two of the children, write down what was going on when the child disclosed the information, because the more that you have, you're going to forget it, is the problem, especially if there's a lot going on and it ends up an extreme case. You're not going to remember every detail, so it's important that you write it down, then call DHS, get it to them as soon as possible. And the other thing is, I would recommend not only calling, but emailing as well. Because if you email it, you may have a person on the other end of the line when you're calling. They're typing as you're sharing information with them, but they may not type it exactly as you spoke it. There is that possibility. So I would recommend um, emailing as well, and email the caseworker so they know, because that's another thing. I don't know how fast it gets turned from the DHS, the person that takes child abuse calls, and those are considered like emergency calls. But if you want to cover every possible end that you need to cover, and so I would recommend emailing your caseworker as well, especially. Like I said, if there's some severe abuse being disclosed and they're visiting with a parent that might have done something, or any relative for that matter, we want to get that in the record as soon as possible, and so that uh, the proper people can make decisions for what's best for the child.
Would you also recommend um, CCing like um, people in their case, like the therapist, or would this initially just go to the caseworker? To
I would. So I think probably how I would do it is, if they have a CASA involved, you could probably also CC the CASA. I don't know that I would. That's a good question. I'm not sure if I would CC the therapist. That never came up in our different cases. That didn't come up, because um, once they started seeing the therapist, and so it ended up that they were. Yeah, I guess that didn't really come up for
Well,
me.
and
So
I actually, now that I'm thinking this through a little bit, because when if the kids have never been in care before and you're their first home, they're not going to have a therapist um,
right.
that soon. It takes a little bit for them to get established
Yeah.
with the therapist. I would recommend getting a therapist involved.
Yeah.
Um,
As soon as possible.
right, but definitely. Um, I would think you would want to CC the CASA, because the CASA is the voice
Yes.
of the child, and so um, if hopefully you do have a CASA,
Yeah.
or is looking into getting a CASA on hand.
Yeah. And if you don't have a CASA, if you're seeing all of a sudden, if you find out they're disclosing information that's of a much more serious nature and concerning nature, then you can start requesting one, and really push for that, because they may not even, especially if there aren't many in your community, it might not be a priority to the caseworker. And another thing I was going to mention is I would always, when you get a new child, get them in. In fact, I think they give you a certain amount of time to get them into the doctor, but I would get them in right away and be an advocate for your child, because if you have concerns, you need to let that doctor know for sure. If they need to have tests done, you need to have let that doctor know. That's it's vital, because I mean, you may not be, they may still be considered a dependent of the state, but you are the child's advocate, and you want to make sure that they are taken care of properly, and that everything is known that needs to be known about that child.
Yes. All right. Well, I guess that is today's topic. And if you guys have any questions, um, please let us know. And just put them in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and like and share with whoever may need this information. And if you have a topic that you would like us to discuss, please put it in the comments, because we're always kind of looking for topics to talk about that could benefit our viewers. So anyway, thank you so much, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for